Politicians in Florida are attempting to legalize forms of sexual harassment against students amid a wave of horrific anti-trans bills. I'm Yoonj Kim, and this is MTV News Need to Know. Last Wednesday, Florida's House of Representatives voted to advance one of the most intrusive anti-trans laws to date. Legislators call it the Fairness in Women's Sports Act, and it would ban trans girls and women from playing on school and recreational sports teams on the sexist and incorrect notion that kids assigned male at birth are naturally more athletic than girls. The bill would also allow school and sports officials to dispute a teenage athlete's gender and could force them to be subjected to genital inspections, something we should never get used to or comfortable saying. Despite that, barely a dozen trans girls have played school sports in Florida since 2013. This non-issue is receiving outsized political support, despite the fact also that 67% of Americans oppose bills restricting trans youth's access to sports. Writer Leon Barria was among the many who were hurt and horrified by this bill. Content warning transphobia, anti-trans bills. I can't even wrap my head around the idea of genital inspection as a means of protecting children. This is invasive, traumatizing, and harmful to cis and trans kids alike. This isn't about protection, it's about control. I'm sick over this. This is the latest from the party that upheld alleged abusers like Donald Trump and Brett Kavanaugh, and they're disguising this as a women's rights issue, with leaders saying that bills like these protect female athletes from being outperformed. It's not entirely just Republicans supporting this bill. One Democrat in the Florida House voted in favor as well, saying it would protect students from stronger and bigger athletes, which in itself is a flawed assumption. There is no evidence or scientific research to support that trans kids are causing any issue or have any advantage in girls' sports. In fact, trans athletes have been allowed to compete in the Olympics since 2004 in the categories they identify with. So if the top sporting event in the world doesn't have this issue, what makes our leaders think it'll affect grade schools? Genital checks were a legalized type of sexual violence used during apartheid in South Africa, when white officials would perform them to determine a person's race. It was meant to degrade and dehumanize people, and the same could be said for what's happening now in Florida. And it wasn't too long ago that the three-piece rule made it so that here in the US, people could be arrested and assaulted by police for wearing clothing that didn't align with a moniker on their ID. As trans and queer stories become ever more visible, we're backsliding toward discriminatory and dangerous policies that attack already marginalized people simply for who they are. So why is the Florida GOP focused on trans kids in the middle of a pandemic in a state where nearly 35,000 people have died of COVID-19, nearly 500,000 unemployed, and the state's mass shootings have increased by over 100% from 2019? Because they failed so greatly on these issues and lost political power in the 2020 elections. They've turned kids into their latest culture war scapegoats. And this is happening on a national landscape. Republican lawmakers in over 24 states have introduced a record-breaking amount of anti-trans legislation in 2021, with the majority targeting trans student athletes and gender-affirming healthcare. These discriminatory bills not only hurt trans people, but they can set dangerous precedents, like politicians policing our bodies. As Democratic Florida Representative Amari Hardy said as he passionately fought against this bill on the House floor,
I wish that what we did in this room was more about reason and less about power.
But all hope is not lost. The Florida State Senate will be the next to consider this bill, so now is the time to call these senators and remind them that they can't legislate control over our bodies or identities, and we can't let them score political points by attacking innocent kids. I'm Yoonj Kim, and that's what you need to know.